Hello, I am Stuart Neville, crime writer by day, guitar baller by night. And this is going to be a two-part video about giving this 1999 Gibson Les Paul Studio a bit of a makeover. It's 22 years old and I could teach you with a bit of TLC. So the first part of this video series is going to look at giving the guitar a fret level and crown. We're going to go step by step. Then the second part will look at cutting the nut slots to the desired depth. And I'm going to give as much detail on those two aspects as I can, but I should clarify this is not meant as a tutorial. It's just how I happen to go about things. So let's get started. So my brother-in-law's very nice 1999 Les Paul Studio, which is going to get just a little bit of TLC here. The first thing is just trying to figure out what's going on. Is there anything that immediately sticks out as being a problem? And the initial inspection showed up a few things, some more serious than others. I mean, all in all, it's in pretty good shape for a guitar that's now 22 years old. One of the first things to spot is that the pickup selector switches were operating back to front, so in the rhythm position, it's choosing the treble pickup, and treble position is choosing the rhythm pickup. So it's just a matter of taking the back off and turn it around, that'll be fine. More serious problem down here at the E string. If I pop these in properly, let's see. You might be able to see in the not very good quality Skycam up there that the low E is sitting a little bit further this way, a little bit closer to the edge of the fingerboard. Took me a wee while, a bit of exam to figure out why. And the reason is that the top of the saddle, where the string crosses the saddle, is a bit mangled. I'm not sure what's happened to it, whether there's something dating back to the factory or something happened to it over the years. There's a groove sitting just a little bit further towards the bass side than it should be. The string's sitting and there's kind of lots of pitting along the top of the saddle. Whether it either had a bang or it's just been filed incorrectly or whatever, I don't know. It basically means that saddle is done. Unfortunately, I can't just replace the saddle. But we've got quite a nice go-to replacement bridge to put on. That'll sort that out. Again, quite an easy fix. Our biggest problem, and it's causing some rattles and buzzes down here, is some quite heavy fretware, particularly around here. I can see my brother-in-law is fond of a D chord and an A chord. Quite deep pits along here. The fretware continues up the fingerboard, but most problematic down here. So we're going to get a fret level in the crown, as well as part of the general setup and a clean up and all the usual stuff when you give a guitar a bit of an MOT. One of the things I need to do before we really do anything else is have a quick look at the truss rod. Now, as far as I know, I mightn't have all the information, but as far as I know, the truss rod hasn't moved in 22 years. So it is quite possible that that could be jammed or stuck, so we need to see if that actually moves. If it doesn't, then we'll have to figure out what to do about that, but hopefully fingers crossed it'll work. So let's get the truss rod cover off. Well, one good thing is that the nut is actually sitting reasonably far out at the end of the fingerboard. I have seen some Gibson guitars, including my own 335, where the nut is recessed so far in that way it's actually very hard to access. So at least there's that. So I need to find my tool for this particular job. I have a StewMac wrench here. They also have these little things as well, but they're a bit fiddly. Let's try the Fancy stew that one. Let's see if we're actually able to loosen the truss rod at all. Right, there we go. Yeah, it loosens. Tightens. Good. That's a good start. Now, I guess we'll whip the strings off and get set up for the fret level and crown, which is going to be our first order of business. So, the strings off, I'm going to set the tailpiece aside. I don't know if that little camera up here will pick up what that looks like. Maybe right over here. You see the groove's off centre, but there's other grooves along the course of the ridge of the saddle, so I've nowhere to actually file another slot in without that slot kind of collapsing into another slot. And one solution might be to file down the top of the saddle to reform that edge. The problem is it would leave, well, it would be a bit ugly for a start, but also would mean I'd have to take down the rest of the saddles and allow for the radius and that kind of thing. So it becomes a major operation. Frankly, I can just put a new ridge on, it's much easier. So that's what we're going to do with that. Let's take off the scratch plate as well, just for the hell, because I want to give it a bit of a clean.
Let's see. Ooh, that sounds like a enough. I'm going to actually set these screws together a bit nice and get this one mixes up with any other screws around it somewhere.
It's a wee bit dusty underneath there. But you can't really get it, so nothing like that. Let's just get it away. We'll get a bit of a dust down. Now I'm going to give the whole guitar proper polish when I'm done. But I'm just getting some of the worst of the dust out of the way. It can be very hard when the guitar's strung up to get at those wee nicks and crowns. Like underneath those pots, for example, I can see it's quite dusty. Some people would tell you don't need to mask off the fretboard for level and crown, but some people will be wrong. I've had mishaps by not doing that, so I always mask everything off. And also because I'm going to be using this Crimson Guitars leveling beam, which has 240 grit sandpaper on one side, 320 on the other, and that's going to travel in a path across very close to that pickup. So I'm going to mask off both picks, but I'm also going to lower the height of the neck pickup, just to limit the possibility of it getting any damage. One of the things I like to do is to put a strip of masking tape all along the edge of the fretboard there, which means when I need to take all the individual pieces off, I can just lift hopefully this one strip off and take everything with it. Life a little bit easier. I should say, I mean, apart from the fretboard, the frets themselves are in actually quite good shape. There's a few little sharp fret ends, so I could use a little rub with a file. But the tangs haven't poked out. There's no fret sprouts or fret lifting or that sort of thing to worry about. So, you know, we're not too bad a shape. Oops. No, it's all going wrong. There we go. Before you do anything else, make sure the neck is straight, because if the neck ain't straight, you're not going to get the frets level. So I'm going to use my handy feeler gauges, go for one of the thinner ones. Let's see. One of the really papery thin ones. What have we got? 0.05 of a millimeter. 0.002 of an inch, that's really skinny. And what we're going to do is use this, what's called notched straight edge. And as you place that on the fingerboard, there's notches to allow the frets to sit between them. And I can eyeball it first. Let me use some light. So you can use a light and just see if there's any light creeping underneath. Now, visually that actually looks pretty straight as is. I might have got lucky. But if I want to belt and braces it, you can use this and see, oops, is that able to sneak underneath any of those? Now that tells me it's able to sneak through the higher frets. I'll probably be able to get through the lower frets too. Yeah. So the neck has a backward bow in it. So what I'm going to do, slack off the truss rod a tiny little bit until I get that straight. Right, that's not passing through anywhere, so we're down to 0.01 of a mil difference there, so I think that's about as straight as we're going to get. So now we're going to have a quick check with the fret rocker. Check if there are any particular frets that are going to cause any issues. This one I did notice down here. Yeah, I'm sitting high. But I'm just going on the fingerboard. The principle of the fret rocker is if you place across 3 frets and it rocks like there, that'll tell you that that fret is sitting ever so slightly higher than these other 2. So a few spots around the neck where I've got a high fret. Visually it doesn't look like any are actually setting up. Whether it's just age or wear and tear, we've just got a bit of unevenness there, but the level and crime will hopefully deal with that for us. So let's get on with masking everything. Now, before I mask the fretboard, in an ideal world, what I'd be able to do is tap the nut, remove it, so it's not in the way. The problem is there's lacquer that's of a piece with the fingerboard and the neck and right here and so on is all the same coat of lacquer. And even if I score that with an X-Acto knife or a blade, if I tap that nut off, there's a good chance it'll take a lump of lacquer with it. So I'm not going to take that risk, so I'm going to do something different with that. I'm going to use some tape. Pull that first of all. And then I'm going to build up a layer of tape over the nut. Flatten it out like that. And just move it forward a little bit at a time. So the forward edge of the tape moves forward a little bit at a time. And the idea is that creates a little bit of a ramp so that when the welding beam travels across, it'll lift rather than smack into the edge of the nut. It will still knock on it a bit, but not as badly as it would without that little ramp there. Now, get on with masking the rest of the fretboard. This is the most tedious part of the whole operation, and I know why a lot of people skip it, because it's tedious. But we're being cautious, particularly when it's not your guitar, or somebody else's guitar. Particularly when it's your brother-in-law's guitar, my goodness. I'd be divorced. If I mess up his fingerboard. So right there at the 6th fret, I've reached the point where this 1-inch masking tape is exactly the space between 2 frets. So I could either keep going with this masking tape, then have to cut with an X-Acto knife spaces for the frets, or as I would prefer, go to some different masking tape. I keep a few different types of masking tape widths around me, but I want at the minute. But this saves me a bit of time cutting and messing about. So again, I've just reached the point where that tape, which I think 3/4 inch tape, is too thick to go between the two, so I'm going to do it a bit thinner. But I take about a 1/2 inch tape. So once again, I'm going to move to some thinner tape. So some 1/4 inch tape. Right, so that's the fingerboard all masked off. Next step of preparation is to mark off the frets with a Sharpie. Now you can use any permanent marker, chisel tip or a fine tip, whatever. I tend to like to use a chisel tip because it's more controllable on the fret. I also like to use a red one. I see a lot of people using blue ones, even black ones. They're all fine, they all work, but I like to use a red one because If your eyesight is as dodgy as mine is, it'd be easier to see the red in contrast to the sort of shadows and so on the frets than black or blue can be. So yeah, perfectly red. All you do is mark a line across the top of each fret, like so. And this will become apparent once I actually get started in earnest on the actual fret leveling, but the idea is, as you wear away, grind away the tops of the frets, those bits of the frets, like these pits from the fretboard, are sitting lower, so they won't be touched by the abrasive. So you'll then be able to see which frets are lower, which frets are higher, where the low spots are. And once all the red is gone, you'll know at that point your frets are nice and level. There we go. I'm done. And that's where we're going to leave it for tonight because it's very late. I'm going to pick up this up again tomorrow. It's very late and I want to go to bed and go to sleep because I got homeschooling with the kids tomorrow. Yay. But yeah, come back to this tomorrow and get these frets left. So, a new day has dawned. Another morning's worth of homeschooling is over. Thank the Lord. I'll come back to this. I'm going to do this fret level and crown. Everything's prepped as for part one. All the frets are marked off, everything's masked, everything's ready to go. Next straight. Ready to rock and roll. Now, I'm going to use this leveling beam from Crimson Guitars. I'm going to have a sip of tea as well. It's basically a piece of aluminium with some 320 grit sandpaper on this side, 240 on this side. And the principle is basically you run this up and down the fretboard like that, and it abrades the top of the frets. And you keep going until there's no more of this red marker left, until these divots and the frets are gone. I've only recently moved to using a leveling beam. I had up until now, till this last few weeks, been using a fret leveling file from Crimson Guitars. Both these are from Crimson Guitars. And this has been serving me well, but I want to try something different. Plus, I'd seen a YouTube video, and I don't know how much stock to put in it. Somebody saying they reckon using a beam gives a more even level to the frets because it covers a greater length at one time. I'm not convinced of that, but I've been giving it a go. Now, I did make a mistake the first couple of times I did this of using some Bosch sandpaper. And a roll like this is a 3M roll, but it was a Bosch roll of silicon carbide sandpaper. Not quite realising that silicon carbide by its nature isn't terribly durable. The grains break down very quickly, so your 280 grit or 240 grit sandpaper becomes 800 grit very quickly within a matter of seconds. This is aluminium oxide paper, I think, aluminium oxide, which hopefully should be more durable and make a better job. Now, the frets are quite badly worn here, and the divots in the frets are quite deep, so I'm going to remove quite a bit of material. 240 grit might not be hard enough. I may end up having to sort of stop and move down to 180 grit. if I'm not making progress. But we'll start with the 240 and see how we go. And as I said, it's a matter of just running the beam along the length of the fretboard and even strokes, and moving across the fretboard as we go. And I normally try and start just off the edge of the fretboard. I kind of imagine the path of the string along the neck. I follow that path, and let's make sure I'm the right. Yeah, 240. And that's it, pretty much. Let's just see how we go. I'm not putting any amount of downward pressure on this. I'm not digging in. I'm just trying to let the abrasive do the work. I'm simply just moving the beam along. I imagine that camera is wobbling about quite a bit as I'm doing this, and I apologise if it's making you seasick. Right, quite a bit to go yet, but I just want to show you what's happening here, because this has made it really obvious where the low spots and the frets are. And I'm going to lift the camera, and it's going to be a bit wobbly. We'll have a look at this. Trying to get a close up of this. You can see where the red marker has been ground away off the top of the frets, but it's left the low points where the divots in the frets are. And then also for some frets that are lower than others. For example, you can see in some frets, there's, say, here, where the red marker's worn away in one part of the fret but still is left another, which means the fret isn't level across the way. So still got to keep working on these. I'll stick with the 240 grip for the time being and see if I feel I need to move down to 180. But yeah, we're in this for the long haul. Okay, so after I moved the camera, unfortunately I managed to stop recording. So you missed about 10 or 15 minutes of hot fretting action. In the meantime, I've made a bit of progress. We're still got some stubborn parts around the neck. Most notably the divots down around close to the nut, a few little points here. I've freshened up my 240 grip. Very close. Now, it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately, that you can very often wind up spending ages grinding away just to get that last little microscopic bit of marker dealt with. We're kind of at that stage now. Tops of the frets are quite flat from the work that's been done. And we're just like almost like a thread of a divot left in a few spots. We'll try and get rid of those. Tiny little spot just left right there. It's proving awkward to get at, but get at it we will. Now, the temptation now might be to linger over that one spot where we're still got that little low bit on the fret. And it really is, it's as thin as a thread, thin as a hair nearly, where that divot is. And so I'd be tempting just to sit there and grind away on that one area, but you can end up then with a flat area on the fingerboard that's flat, you know, that's lower than everywhere else, and we can't have that. Everything has to be even and level. So it means taking more meat off the rest of the frets, just that one spot, unfortunately, but that is what we'll have to do. So what I think I'm going to do, there's a tiny little bit of the divot left on this side of the fret, on the nut side of the fret. It's more or less ground away on the treble side of the fret, the bridge side of the fret, I should say. So the time I shape and crown that, that's going to be more or less gone. So I think I'm going to stop now rather than take away any more meat, because at the point where the string will rest on the top of the fret seems to be okay. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Otherwise I'm going to be here all day. I'm going to lose an awful lot of fret material for not a lot of benefit. So at this stage our frets are all nice and level. If we were to take a plane, you know, a line along the fret, that's basically the path the string would take. Everything's nice and level. If I lean over and look along the length of the frets, you know, I can see that they're all sitting at the same height. But they're the wrong shape now, which is the problem we need to correct. Our fret, when it's nice and new, oops, with that kind of a shape. A nice domed kind of a shape. But when we crown or level it, we take off the upper part and we leave this flat area on top of the fret. So our next object is to crown it, which is to smooth that flat area over. And leave our fret nice and round again. And there are a few ways we can go about doing that. A few different tools you can use that. Until fairly recently I've been using this 3-sided file from Crimson Guitars. Principle being that you go along the fret one side, go along the fret the other side, grinding an angle to make the fret kind of almost a triangular shape, which you then smooth over. Problem I find with that is, A, it's very, very time consuming, and B, it's difficult. Is tendency, for example, the file to slip, you go across the fret and score it, that kind of thing. And I decided to seek out an alternative, and I bought this tool from StewMac. It's called a Z file. So I've been using this original Z file from StewMac. I don't know how well you can make that out, but there's an offset kind of V shape on each cutting edge. Each one's opposite the other. To leave two facets. And the idea being that you go one way, flip it over, do it that way, and you end up with a rounded crown on the fret. And theoretically, you shouldn't be able to grind away the very top of the fret that you've just leveled, so you can't undo the good work you've just done. And I've used this a few times since, and I found it a real boon, an awful lot easier to use and much faster. I'm going to move the camera again in a moment just to show you that at work, but first what I've got to do is this once more, mark off the tops of the frets. So as you can see, the top of the fret is marked in red. Nice and easy to see in contrast with the fret and the white tape and so on. And with this file, I'll actually show you what happens with the other file. If I use a triangular file, you've got to kind of run along the side of the fret. Tilting it over a little bit. Taking away a little bit of fret at a time. Which is fine, you can see I've done a bit of that there and I've taken away very little material. Pardon me, it's not going to the camera. Let's get the better view on that. There we go. With this file, with the Z file, it is much easier. I'm doing this left-handed just because of where the camera is, but basically just run this back and forth, place this on top of the fret. Back and forth a few times, flip it over, go over to the other side of the fret. You'll see, hopefully, what we're left with is a thin line of marker. And that's the part of the fret that hasn't been touched by the file. So that means the fret is now coming in an arch, or a dome instead of a flat top line. This bit at the end, you can see I had a bit more meat taken off, so it's a bit flatter than the rest, so I'm going to give it a bit more tension. Oops, also put it actually on the fret. So, see now we've got this very thin line. And that's what I'm going to try and do it on all the frets. And again, with the Z file, they're expensive, they're a very expensive tool. I think in sterling, it costs like £80, but it does that so quickly and so easily that for me it's worth the money. I'm not a professional at this, I'm an amateur. I don't do this kind of work for anybody else, I don't get paid to do it, and do it for my brother-in-law just as a favour. I do it on my own guitars, but even without me making any money on it, I find this is well worth the extra layout, just for space, time and ease. But you keep going. Again, you'll see this end of the fret, the treble side, has more flat area on it, so you need to keep giving it a bit more tension. There we go. And so on along the fingerboard. And hopefully doing this you can see why I use the red marker rather than a blue or a black. Blue or black will kind of, it'd be difficult to distinguish between the marker and shadow or reflection of light on the fret itself. Whereas a red marker you can see very clearly that it's red and therefore still needs work. So I'm going to keep going along the length of the fretboard until I'm done. And you probably don't really need to watch me do that because it's not very exciting. So heads down, stage at the end. So our frets are levelled and roughly crowned. They have been given the dome shape. So our next step is to start to polish them. And I've got myself a set of scraps of sandpaper here, going from 320 grit up these steps all the way to 1500 grit. And the idea here is that we wrap the sandpaper around your finger like so, which kind of creates a rolling kind of a tool that rolls over the frets. And the 320 grit is the last grit that I leveled the frets with. I'm just going to give it a very quick run with that before I move up the other grits. Just to have some consistency in the amount of scoring that there is on the frets. So, and it's simply a matter of sweeping your hand up and down the neck in that kind of a motion, just to get things smoothed over, that your finger will bump over each of the frets in each direction, and just take a little bit of the material away each time as it passes, just like this. So that's all I'm going to do with the 320 grit. I'm just using that to transition between the leveling beam and this process. What I'll also do is go across the fret a little bit. Ideally you want to finish up by going across along the length of the fret rather than the neck. Because that's the direction the string moves in when you're playing. And the idea is there just to leaves little kind of scoring that the player can notice as possible at the end of the process. I'm just going on, just doing a little bit like that. Okay, that's that. So now moving up to 400 grit. Getting quite shiny now, which is good. Finally, in the sandpaper, is moving up to 1500 grit. Oh, sore hand. Gonna see how that looks. Pretty good. Now, the last step of this particular process is final polish with some fret rubbers. Now, different people have different ways of going about this. You could, if you wanted, move to micro mesh pads or cloths, which I would sometimes do. I just don't happen to have them to hand at the moment, so I'm not going to do that today. What I have done in the past also is use something like Brasso or Silvo, like a metal polisher, and give the frets a polish with that. But one of the easiest ways of going about it is to use something like this. These are fret rubbers. These are again from Crimson Guitars. Different luthier supply places do their own versions there, and I think StewMac do a version as well. And pardon my allergies are playing up today. So they come in 4 grits there. There's coarse, medium, fine, and super fine. So just moving my way up the grits. Again, at this stage, I'm only moving across the frets, not along them. I used to go along, but again realizing that it's best to go across the frets because that's the direction the string moves in. because that's where you want the smoothest travel. So just a fret at a time, going along, giving it a bit of a polish. And you can sort of move it like that as you do it, so it gives kind of the shoulder of the fret a little bit of a rub as well. And you might just be getting a view of my elbow right now, I'm not sure. So that's the coarse grain done, going to the medium. Now, same process just over again. Okay. Onto the fine grit now. Finally, at the end of all that, onto the super fine. My dog's barking, that would be the postman. Okay, so that's us done with fret level, crown and polish. I'm just going to take the masking tape off now. See what we've got. So that's done for today. My next major step will be to file the nut slots to a better depth than they were, but also to compensate for the lower frets that we now have. I also want to give the guitar a bit of a clean. Sorry, the electronics, that kind of stuff. That's for part 2. I think part 2 will give a detailed look at cutting the nut slots. I think that's worth spending some time on. But for now, thanks for sticking with me. If you found that useful, please like and subscribe. Bye bye.